We welcome in Mel Zachter, Aaron Swade, Baruch Ian, Marshall Castle, Irving Fishbaum, Shalom Fogel, Nachman Chapler, Rabbi Kranz, Ruben Pollack, Shimon Klein, Moshe Lehman, Avram Schenkman, Moshe Jacklin, Yitzi Muller, Ilya Shutman. Here in Shul, we have Saba, we have Baruch Weber, Rich Lenner, Reb Kramer, and Gedalia Engel. We say hello to Berish from far away. He'll be back soon. And we learn, sponsored by Baruch Ian, Lili Nishmas Esther Basyani, Yaakov Chaim Ben Abba, Avram Ben Shmuel HaKohen, L'Refuah Shalema for Baruch Shlomo Ben Lina. We learn, sponsored by Aaron Swade, Lili Nishmas Chana Bas Shmuel and Freda Bas Shol, his sister. By Mark Frankel, L'Refuah Shalema for Miriam Sarah Bas Tzipora, Chana Bas Gittel Esther. By Be'er Goldwasser for Akar Satay for what Hashem did for his family and for Chayla Yisrael. By Shimon Deer for all the Chayla Adaf. We learn L'Refuah Shalema for my Shver Avigdor Aryeh Ben Rivka, Meir Ben Chaya Sarah, who I'm delighted to say was taken off the ventilator today, which is excellent news. And Yehuda Cyril Bas Miriam, they should have a L'Refuah Shalema B'Seich Shar Chayla Yisrael. We welcome in Dr. Block. And let's get moving over here. We're holding bottom line on Daf Chav Gimel Amid Beis. V'rami de Rameir ad Rameir, v'rami de Rabbanan ad Rabbanan. We have a stira Rameir on Rameir, and a stira the Rabbanan on Rabbanan. The Tanya, for you learned in a Braisa. Remember, Ishtay Kagufay. A woman is like her husband. Now, in Ma'aser Sheni, as Rich said, we're going to talk about Ma'aser Sheni. Ma'aser Sheni in the first, second, fourth, and fifth year of the Shemitah cycle, you have to carry the second tithe and bring it to Yerushalayim. If you have a lot of bushels and you live far from Yerushalayim, it would be troublesome to take all of the bushels themselves. So you could redeem it, you could redeem it with money and take the money. If the owner himself redeems it, he has to add a surcharge of a fifth. If somebody else redeems it, then they just pay its value. The question is, what happens if a wife redeems her husband's Ma'aser Sheni? So, Ein Isha Poida Ma'aser Sheni B'loi Chaimish. A woman cannot redeem the Ma'aser Sheni without the fifth. Why? Because we assume that the woman is like her husband, and therefore it's as if he's redeeming it, and therefore he has to add the surcharge of a fifth. Rab Shimon Elazar says in the name of Rab Meir, Isha Poida Ma'aser Sheni B'loi Chaimish. A woman could redeem the Ma'aser Sheni without the fifth. Says the Gemara, Heichi Dami. If she's using the husband's money, so of course she has to add a fifth. Or if it's Zuzei de Baal, her husband's money, Ma'aser de Baal, and it's Ma'aser of the husband, Shlichusa de Baal Kavda, she's doing the agency of the husband, so of course she has to add a fifth. What would be the svara of Rameya to say that she doesn't have to add a fifth? Vela bezuzei dida, Ma'aser didei. It's talking about that she has money from the Nichsei Malug. Nichsei Malug is property that's hers, and it's Nichsei Malug, and it's his Ma'aser. Says the Gemara, that we have a miyat in the pasuk. The pasuk says, "Ish amarachmana, v'lo isha." That a man, that when he separates from his ma'aser, has to add a fifth, and not an isha. So there, in that specific case, we have a farish pasuk that she would not have to add the fifth. Elalav, it must be kihai gavna. It must be our case that what happened is Yitzi was makna to this woman money for the purpose of redeeming the husband's meiser. Remember, this is going according to the Mandiyama that says that if he says that I'm giving it, it goes right away to the husband. So he circumvents that problem by not giving it to her. He's giving it in order to redeem the husband's meiser. It must be, says the Gemara, El lavke ay gavna, de akne lo achar mona, Yitzi gives a mona, v'amala, and he says, Almanashe tipti bayes ha-meiser, on the condition that you redeem the meiser. Now, Rameir said that doesn't work, because as soon as he says kni, it goes to the husband. And it's as if it's the husband's. And what he says afterwards, on the condition that it should be to redeem the meiser, is too late. And then, according to Rameir, she would have to add a fifth. And here Rameir says, you don't have to add a fifth. The ipcha shemana, and the opinions in Rameir and Rabbanan are reversed. So Rabbiya says no sweat. Epach, switch it around. Rava says no. La'olam loy teipach. You don't have to switch it around. La'olam loy teipach. As we welcome in a lot of people joining us a little late. Shelley Zeitlin, Mark Franco, and Pesach.
I'm out of bourbon.
Pesach Siegelman. Rabbi say Marshall Castle is on bourbon alert. He's dry. So we need to bring in more Zoomers, because when we reach 50, he gets another case of bourbon. So he's really desperate.
Yes, sir. I'm in withdrawal.
Really desperate. So now,
go to Franco's house and drink all his.
So says the Gemara, Rav Amar la'olam loy teipach. But here's an interesting situation. And here we're talking about meiser that she inherited from her maternal family. She inherited from her parental line. And the question is, normally, the way it works is that she inherits the real estate, and the husband gets the usufruct, gets the payers. So then it would be the husband's property. However, here the question is does the usufruct go to the husband, or do we say that that because Meiser Sheni is Mammon Gevaya, is considered like the property of the divine, then it doesn't pass to the husband. So says the Gemara, Rav Amar lo'olam loy teipach. V'hacha b'meiser de'asem b'bein nasha askina. Here we're talking about meiser that came from her parental home. V'rameir l'tamei, Rameir goes according to his reasoning, the Amar meiser mammon hektishu. Meiser is considered the property of hektish. V'loy kani le'bal, and the husband does not acquire it. Although normally, when she inherits something, the karka remains hers, and the payers go to the husband. But that's only by regular property. Here, since this is not regular property, it's considered the property of the divine, the usufruct does not pass over to the husband. Rabbanan l'tamayu, Rabbanan go according to their reason, the Amar Mammon Hedyadu, it's considered regular money, v'kani le'bal. And therefore, if the husband acquires it, then hilkach shlichusa de bal kavda, she's doing the agency of her husband, and when she does the agency of her husband on her husband's property, then she has to add a surcharge. So here it's interesting. According to this, so it really is interesting. What money is she using? She's using the money of her husband. In the event that it's Mammon Gevaya, it's her husband's money, but it's her property, her fruit, because it doesn't pass on to the husband as normal Nichsei Malug, because Ma'aser Sheni Mammon Gevaya. And therefore, since it's the husband's money and her property, you don't have to give a surcharge. However, if you hold Ma'aser Sheni Mammon Hedyot, so then when she inherits the property, he inherits the usufruct. So then it's his property and his money, then you have to add the surcharge of a fifth. Now the rest of the daf talks about the din that an Eved Kanani goes out if you knock out his eye, his adult tooth, or one of the 24 Rashi Evarim She'enam Chayzrin, or one of the 24 tips of the limbs that do not regenerate. That means if you cut off his 10 fingertips, or 10 toes, or part of his ears, his nose, or the male organ. In all those cases, the slave will go free. Now, the Gemara is going to have a large discussion of whether when he goes free, do you also have to write a get shikhr, a writ of emancipation, in order for him to be able to marry a Beis Yaakov girl, or you don't have to write a writ of emancipation. So let's see the Gemara. First the Gemara develops. Tana, Yotza b'shein v'ayin, the Eved goes out. If you knock out his tooth, his eye, v'roshe evarim she'enam chayzrim, and the tips of the limbs that do not regenerate. So the Gemara says, Bishloi m'shein v'ayin, ksive, shein v'ayin, the tooth and the eye, that's written. El roshe evarim minolan, how do you know the tips of the limbs? So the Gemara says, Dumya de shein v'ayin, it's similar to a tooth and an eye. Ma shein v'ayin, the tooth and the eye. Mumin shebegali, they are blemishes that are outside of the body. Ve'enam chayzrim, and they don't regenerate. Af kol mumin shebegali, anything that's outside of the body. Ve'enam chayzrim, and it doesn't regenerate. Says, well, wait a second. Remember, we always learned that if the Torah says something once, you could learn from it to everywhere else. If it says it twice, maybe it's only those two things and nothing else, because otherwise, why did it have to say it twice? Only say it once. That a tooth and an eye should be like two psukim that come to teach us the same thing. Because if it was supposed to be by everywhere, then only say it by one and learn it out from that one. From the fact that it says it two, maybe it's telling you only these two and nothing else. Says, no, it has to say it by both because we wouldn't know one from the other. Tzricha. Dikas Rachman Shein, if it would say a tooth, Havamina, I would think, Afilu Shein de Cholov. I would think even a baby tooth. Kas Rachman Ayin. That's why it says an eye. An eye, there's no baby eye. Dikas Rachman Ayin, Havamina Ma Ayin Shenivra Imai. The eye was there from the beginning of his creation. Av Kol Shenivra Imai. So also, anything that's from the beginning of the person's creation. Aval Shein, the adult tooth, which is not there from the beginning of his creation. Why? Therefore, tzricha. Says the Gemara, but we have one of the Yud Gimel Midas Shatar Nidreshes Behem is a klal prat. That if it says a generalization followed by a specification, we say Ein B'chlal Elamashe B'frat. That's it. So ve'ema kiyake, when you hit klal shein va'ayin, the tooth in the eye, prat, klal prat, generalization, specification, Ein B'chlal Ela Masha B'frat. Shein V'ayin, only the tooth and the eye, Midiachrin Light, nothing else. Says Gemara, no, it's not just the klal of prat. It's a klal of prat, a klal. L'chavshi yishalchenu, we send him free, chaz of a klal. So that's a klal of prat, a klal, generalization, specification, generalization. Iyata don elakaina prat. We only learn similar to the specification. Ma prat, mafurish mum shebegali. It's an exposed blemish, ve'enam chayzim, and doesn't regenerate. Av kol mum shebegali, ve'enam chayzim. Says the Gemara, but ima prat mafurish mumu shebegali ubatal mimalachtai, and it loses its function, because when a tooth goes out, when an eye is knocked out, it loses its function. Ve'enoi chayzer. Af kol mumin shebegali, it has to be a exposed blemish. Ve'enoi chayzer ubatal malachtai. But if it doesn't lose its function, then he shouldn't go free. Alama Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Tolash beziknai, if you pulled his hair, vidildo by etzem, and you dislodge the bone in the jaw, evid yaitziv and l'cheres, the slave goes free, even though pulling that single bone in the jaw doesn't take away the function of the jaw. Says, no, you're right. L'chavshi yishalchenu ribuyu. We send him to freedom. That's not just a mere generalization, but it's an amplification that comes to include more. Says the Gemara, if it's an amplification that comes to include even more, then afilu hiko al yadav v'tzamsa, even if you hit him on his hand and it withers, v'sayfa lazer, and it's going to regenerate nami, it should also go free. If you hit him on the hand and it withers and it's going to regenerate, he doesn't go free. Says the Gemara, well, that's why it says the specification of Shein V'ayin. So Shein V'ayin comes to tell you two restrictions. Number one, that it has to be a mum shebegali, and number two, that it cannot regenerate. Tan Rabbanan, here comes the question. Do you have to write a writ of emancipation or not? So says the Gemara, we only need 28 more Zoomers to get Marshall a Happy New Year. So let's go. Does anybody have a connection with Chaim Lerner? We need to call Chaim Lerner and find out where Chaim Lerner is. Okay, so now, Tana Rabbanan, Baruch is 17 lines from the top of Chavdal Amid Beis. 17 lines from the top of Chavdal Amid Beis. There we go. Mo Kushner is coming for the sake of Marshall's bourbon. Welcome, Mo. Welcome, Mo. Tan Rabbana. Bikulan Eved Yotzbem Lecheris. With all of these limbs knocked out, the slave goes free. V'tzorach yet shichra, and he needs a writ of emancipation in order to marry a Beis Yaakov girl. Different Reb Shimon. Reb Meir Aymein Etzach. Reb Meir says he doesn't need it. Reb Lezer Aymein Tzarach. Reb Tarfon Aymein Etzach. Reb Akiva Aymein Tzarach. He needs it. Hamachriim lefnei chachamim Aymein. Those that want an issue, a compromise, before the sages said Nirin Divrei Reb Tarfon. It's reasonable, the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, it's more probable. The opinion of Rabbi Tarfon that you don't need a writ of emancipation, b'shein v'ayin, with a tooth and an eye. Sha'torah zochzalei, because that's a beferish apostle. V'divrei Rabbi Akiva, that you do need to get shecher b'sharei varm, by the other limbs, Hayalu knas chachamim, since it's a penalty of the sages. So right away the Gemara says, in bewilderment, knaso, what do you mean a penalty? Kroika darshinan, you just darshin the klal product klal with a ribui. That's one of the Yud Gimel Midas. That's not a knas derabana. Elo hoyel umedrish chachamim. Now here, this might be something that many of you wonder in your travels through Shas. Why are some things taught by a beferish pasuk, and other things we learn out from a Gzeirah Shava, from a kol, from a drasha? So here the Gemara says there could be a halachic difference. That which is a beferish pasuk, you don't need to get shecher. That which is learned out from a drasha, you do need to get shecher. In other words, something that's learned out from a beferish pasuk, what we call behedya, outright, could be stronger. Says the Gemara, well, my time at Reb Shimon, what's the reason that Reb Shimon holds that across the board you need to get shecher? Even if you knock out his tooth and an eye, you also have to give a get shecher. So he says he learns out from a woman. Yolav shiluach meisha, right? It says b'shilcha mebeisai, and here it says achavshi yishalchanu. Ma isha b'shtar, you need to get. Af even nami b'shtar. Rameh says if you said yishalchenu chavshi, saying the shiluach first, because of kavshi libesayf, and therefore we could darshan that in order to go free, you need yishalchenu, you need to get to the kamre. Hashta, because of the chavshi yishalchenu, that means he's free even before the yishalchenu. And the yishalchenu is only there for a ribui to tell you that he goes free, even if you pull out bone in the jaw, even though it doesn't lose its function. Tan Rabbanan. Hiko al einai v'sima. If you hit him on his eye and blind him. Al oznai v'chirsha. In his ear and you deafen him. You give him a slug in the eye and he becomes blind. You give him a slug in the ear and he becomes deaf. Eved yaitz b'em l'cheres. He goes free. Neged einai v'eina raya. If you bang the wall opposite his eye, and from the shock of the noise, he goes blind. Kineged oizna, you bang the wall opposite his ear. V'eina shemeya ein eved yaitz b'em l'cheres. He doesn't go free. Now we'll see that the Gemara will explain that it's only a grama. So it's the shock generated that he should be afraid, and therefore since he caused himself the damage, so therefore that's not a case where he goes free. So the Gemara says, I don't like that. You mean a noise? You're not responsible for a noise? That a noise is not considered an action that you're responsible for? Now, before we learn the next Gemara, I want to give you a very small preface. When an animal damages b'derech urche, in a normal way, which is called the damage of regel, you pay a nezek sham. If it's not the animal itself, but the force of the animal, what we call tsroiris, if you remember from yeshiva days, if a chicken is going and hopping, and pebbles shoot out from under its foot, and the pebbles break a window, so therefore that's the force of the animal. So the Rabbanan say it's a chatzi nezek, Sumchus says it's a nezek shalom. So the first teaching over here is going to be like Sumchus. That's the way Rashi learns. Tarnago shahoishit roishay la'avir klei zchuchus. He sticks his head into a glass, v'tokabay, and he blows. Vishavray, and breaks the glass. So that's the force of the animal, because the animal blew, and it broke the glass. Mishalem Nezek Shalom, pay a Nezek Shalom, that's according to Sumchas. V'amar Rav Yosef, Imrei Bei Rav, Sus Shetzonaf, a horse that neighs, V'chamor Shenoar, a donkey that brays, V'shibru Kalim B'seich Habayis, and they break Kalim, Mishalem Chatzi Nezek, they pay a half a Nezek. That's according to the Rabbanan, that say for force, you chayiv only a Chatzi Nezek. But the bottom line is, we see over here that for noise, you are chayiv. Amalei, Shani, Adam, it's different to man. By the utensil, obviously it's the noise that broke the utensil. But by a man, when you bang opposite his ear, it's his fear. So he had a hand in it. Shani Adam, the Kavan, the Bardas, who, since he's a Bardas, Iu Mavis Nafshe, he brought the fright onto himself, and therefore, you can't hold the person accountable for it. That's called the grama ben Izak. Kedetanya, hamavis eschaveirai, if you scare someone, and you cause him harm, he has a heart attack because you scared him. Pater medine adam, you're exempt in the Jewish court, because grama ben Izak and pater, but the chayev bedine shemayim. But you're chayiv morally. Morally, you got to pay the money. Ketzad, toka ba'oznai v'chirshai. As we welcome Jack Silverman. It's good to have Jack Silverman joining us. Welcome to our Zoom family. If you can't be here in person, at least you're on the Zoom family, which helps Marshall's bourbon account.
Yes, sir. Let's do it. 25 more. I need to get drunk like a skunk.
If we could have 51, please, so we don't have to worry if Marshall gets drunk. Then
I can zoom out.
Now, so says the Gemara, Taka ba'oznai v'chirshu.
Some barbecued beef for you and some unbarbecued beef, depending what you want.
Mute yourself, Marshall.
Barbecued should be in the pot, the unbarbecued is out.
Barbecue.
Oops, sorry.
Barbecue, Marshall. Taka ba'oznai, if you blow in his ear, v'chirshu, and you deafen him, potter, because as we said, that's a grama. Achzeyu, but if you hold on to him, you grab him, so you did already now a direct act, v'taka ba'oznai, and you blow in his ear, v'charshu, then chayiv. Then you're chayiv, because you did a direct act with him. Now, Tana Rabbanan. Hikeyu al einai, if you hit him on the eye. Now here you didn't take away its full function. Hikeyu al einai v'chasa, and the eye became dim. Al shinai, on his tooth v'nadida, and the tooth became loose. Im yachal ishtamish b'hem achshav, if he could still use it, ein eved yaitz b'hem l'cheres. V'im lav, it becomes useless, then eved yaitz b'hem l'cheres. Tanya idach, hari shahoisa einoi kehuya, if his eyesight was weak, v'sima, and you blinded him. Shinoi neduda, his tooth was loose, ve'apila. So then it depends if previously he had use with it. Im yochel ishtamish bem kvar, if previously he had use, and now you take away the use by blinding him or knocking it out, then eved yaitz bem l'cheres. V'im lav, but if beforehand it was already useless, then you didn't do anything. V'im lav, ein eved yaitz bem l'cheres. Utzvicha. Di ashminan hakamaisa, the first brisa, mishum dem ekara nahira bari. The reason why Yeah. The Ashmin Akamaisa Mishim Mekar Nahira Bari. Originally he had good sight. V'ashta Nahira Kchisha. And actually when it says weak sight, it doesn't mean even weak sight because we said he can't use it. Aval Hacha Mekar Nami Nahira Kchisha. But over here, where originally he had poor sight, I would think you're not chayiv. Even though the word Nahira Kchisha in the two cases are not the same. So a very strange usage of the word words Nahira Kchisha, right? Because in the first teaching it says that when im yochel ishtamish bem achshav ein eved yoytz mem lecheres. So it says, when does David go free? Only where you can't use it at all. So over there, when it says Nahira Kchisha, it means you can't use it at all. Over here, however, it says that initially it was Nahira Kchisha. It doesn't mean it couldn't use it at all. Because if he couldn't use it at all, then you're not chayiv. So when it says initially he had Nahira Kchisha, it means that he could use it partially. So the phrase Nahira Kchisha in the first time and Nahira Kchisha in the second time is not the same. Rashi bavons that. If you look at Rashi, v'hashta Nahira Kchisha she'ein yochel ishtamish, you can't use it. And then he says, the meikara nami Nahira Kchisha v'afa gavdi yochel ishtamish by. So that's a different meaning of Nahira Kchisha. Right? I might think it's not an eye anymore. And if we say the second teaching, that's mishum the samya legamre, because you're blinding them altogether. Aval hasam, in the first case, deloy samya legamre. In the first case, where you just made it dim, and you didn't blind him altogether, even though he can't use it, but you didn't blind him altogether, Aimalai, I would say you're not chayiv. Tzricha, that there also he goes free. So in other words, it's telling you that in the first case, where he still had he saw some forms, but if he can't use it, even though you didn't blind him completely, he still goes free. Now here the Gemara says an interesting thing. Tana Rabbanan, Harishoya Rabbi Roife. If the master was a doctor, and the Eved said, could you do me a favor and put medicine in my eye? Could you put medicine in my eye? Visima. And he blinds him. He's a dentist. And you tell him, could you scrape off a cavity? V'ipila, and he knocks out the tooth. He could laugh at the Adan, and laugh at him because he tried to do something nice, and you lose me. So Sichek ba'adan, he could laugh at the Adan and go free. Shem Gamliel Aimer, no. The only time he goes free is Vishichasa, is if the Adan did an act of destruction. He meant to give him a punch. Achi Yischaven L'Shachasa. You have to have in mind to hurt him, not if he was doing to help him. The Rabbanon that say that he goes free, Hai V'Shichasa Mayavdalei. So they use it for a different drasha. What happens if the Adon was an obstetrician, and the Shivcha was pregnant and he was delivering her baby? And when he takes out the baby, he pokes out its eye. Now there, he didn't even intend to go near the eye. See, in the first case, he was working on the eye. But there, he didn't even intend to touch the eye. So there, even Rabbanan agree that the baby slave doesn't go free. He puts his hand into the womb of the maidservant to deliver the baby, and he blinds the fetus, potter. The fetus doesn't go free. My time, until he meant to touch that aver. Here he didn't even mean to touch the aver. How does he know this case? There's two drushes. It could have said just v'shiches, and it says v'shichasa. She doesn't dash in there. One more case. Amar Rav Sheshes. If his eye was blind, and the Adon knocks it out of the socket. It was already blind, but now he knocks it out of the socket. The Eved goes free. My timer, because now he caused him to be mechusar averu. He caused him to be lacking a limb. Now, how do we know? I mean, if it's blind, it's blind. How do we know that it's a bigger chesaron if the socket is empty? So we learned this out. There's an interesting halacha. This is something that changes the whole dinim of bird offerings. You know, by male offerings, we know that there's a big difference by a male, a female, right? An ola has to be a male, right? There's all kinds of differences. And we know that an animal can't have a blemish. It can't have a wart. One limb can't be longer than the other limb. All these dinim don't apply by a bird offering. A bird offering doesn't have gender. There's never, could you imagine what Gedalia, could you imagine what Masechtas Kingdom would look like if we had to start worrying about male and female? So there's no male and female differential by a bird. And there's no blemish by a bird. So a bird could be blind and kosher for a korban. But if it's missing an eye, it's no good. As the Gemara says, "V'tana tuna, tamas v'zachris behema." There's blemish-free and gender by an animal. Ve'ein tamas v'zachris ba'if. There's no blemishes or gender by a bird. However, yochel yovsha gapa, I might think that if its wing got withered, nikta ragla, or if its foot was cut off, or nechtata einea, or its eye was punched out of its socket, it's good. Talmud loimer mina of only some of birds, v'loy kol, not all of a bird. So you see, a blind bird is good, but a bird without an eye in the socket is no good. So we see that there's a differential. So therefore, even if the Eved is blind, but you knock the eye out of the socket, the Eved goes free.